All right, guys, so in this video, I'm just going to give you a breakdown of some of the systems that I use with Claire in order to get her into the shape of her life, into achieving the results that ultimately I've shared with you. Now, it's really important to note that we've achieved this, obviously, with coronavirus, with a lockdown. So the type of results that I'm sharing with you are high-level results. But the results that quite easily could have not been achieved, because ultimately during this lockdown period we had no idea when we were going to be able to get back to a gym. We had no idea if a photo shoot was even going to be possible. So it's testament to Claire that obviously she's been able to stick by and large to some of the systems that have been set during lockdown to make sure that when she came back it was a case of being able to push on and achieve the result. So a bit of a background history. Obviously, when you're thinking about most CMP clients, they're responsibility rich and they're also time poor. We have to maximize every training and every nutritional system so that we're going to get the changes, we're going to get the results that we want. Oftentimes our clients have got responsible jobs, they've got their own businesses, they've often got lots of travel, they work long hours, they might have young children, they might have elderly parents, tons of responsibilities that basically mean we need to be spot on in terms of the systems that we'll pick and the nutritional plan that we're going to use so that we can maximize the results in the amount of time that we have available. And I'm going to detail some of the training systems that I took Claire through. So when we think about obviously how we worked together, and I'm coming back because obviously we've gone through lots of different phases, we had to make lots of adjustments during lockdown and because of COVID. So right at the start of the year when we took the initial assessments, Claire's key area that she wanted to change was basically her belly fat. I've worked with Claire now for a couple of years. So when she first came to see me, she's a completely different person. Her key issues was a lower back. She was really struggling. She had massive issues in terms of lower back pain. Couldn't pick her weight up off the floor and wouldn't even be able to consider doing something like we've done now. Obviously, we've got that foundation of strength training in, and typically speaking, as she's a long-term client of mine, it would be a case of working off obviously throughout the year, holiday weight, things like that she would put on to keep her generally ticking over, keep her in shape. We've achieved an initial transformation a couple of years ago, and then obviously she's continued with me, and we've now stepped this up to the biggest challenge that she'd faced in terms of a photo shoot. So key areas that she wanted to change were primarily belly fat. She'd seen me take lots of clients through photo shoots in the gym and also oversee lots of other photo shoots through programming and through obviously supporting the trainer so that they knew how to pull the result that ultimately was achieved. So she knew obviously what could be achieved because she'd seen other people do it. She'd just not been in a position where she could commit the time to be able to do a photo shoot prep. And a photo shoot prep is way more demanding than a general body transformation. So this is where you're taking a body transformation and you're taking it up maybe another 50% in terms of the expected results. So the commitment level obviously needs to be much higher. The training stimulus is much higher in terms of volume as well. So when we're thinking about the phases that we went through, the starting statistics, she was around about 56 kilos and body fat, I would say roughly around about 22%, something like that. So we started off with a metabolic systemic program. These were the first two phases that we ran. So peripheral heart action training supersets, where we took an upper body exercise, we paired it with a lower body exercise. We were coming back off after Christmas. So this first phase for 4 weeks was an introductory phase into peripheral heart action training. Then in phase 2, which lasted another 4 weeks, we kept that systemic metabolic focus. We now increased the volume of the peripheral heart action training supersets, and we changed the exercise selection. So this could have been as something as simple as moving from a chest press machine to now into a bench press, for example. We're increasing the complexity of the exercises that we're picking. Then as we moved into phase 3, right before obviously we went into lockdown, I chose an heavy light method. So the heavy light method is where we're taking a muscle group through its short position and also its lengthened position. Oftentimes where we're taking the actual muscle group through the short position, this would be the heavy rep, so 8 for example, and then through the lengthened position, the 15 rep would come into the superset. We could actually use this as a pre-exhaust, so we could do it the other way around and obviously train the lengthened position first before we went into the short position. So this could be, again, if we're using chest press as an example, this could be a pec fly and it could be a chest press. So this could be a way that we set up the heavy light. The heavy light system followed on from the peripheral heart action training supersets because we now added in a local based stimulus. So we were still training under a systemic program in terms of it being a program that's going to challenge the cardiorespiratory system, the musculoskeletal system, the liver's ability to clear waste products, improve obviously glucose metabolism and looking to improve fatty acid metabolism. But now because those supersets for each individual muscle group now came into the program, we were looking at also local based changes. So when we're looking at the muscle cell, we start to see an increase of lactic acid, an increase of waste products. We challenge the muscle cell's ability to continue to perform under fatigue. So we start to get some of the adaptations that we're wanting metabolically in terms of how that muscle cell is now utilizing fuel and also essentially recovering that fuel through increased glycogen storage capacity as the adaptation from the training system starts to kick in. Then ultimately we went into a lockdown period. So this lockdown period, it would have been very easy again for Claire to fall off. But with all CMP clients, they had constant communication on a weekly basis to me, and all programs were set either for body weight or if they had some dumbbells or they had any sort of equipment, then we could utilize that. So Claire went down the route of following the dumbbell based system. She got a small setup at home. So we got obviously some dumbbells and a bench. And we followed actually an upper lower split. So we moved out of the heavy light system into an upper lower split, which is completely different. Again, we're getting some of the local adaptations, we're getting some of the systemic adaptations, but these programs compared to what you're able to do in a gym would be considered more often than not just ticking over programs. If she didn't gain body fat during that stage of lockdown, then that would have been a huge win. It would have been massive progress. And then obviously as lockdown continued, the program progressed in terms of it being an upper lower split to then moving into more of a sarcoplasmic hypertrophy based program where we went down the route of split training. So this, for example, would be chest, shoulders, triceps, it would be back, rhomboids, biceps, and it would also be legs. Now this would be now a 5-day split. So we'd step things up so that we're actually getting twice per week stimulus for 2 of the systems on a rotation. That then means the system that missed out the week before would then get the twice per week stimulus. So if we're thinking about some of the adaptations that we're going to get from this, then we're going to be constantly increasing the demand for protein synthesis should the nutritional status of that client be adequate. Obviously, we're providing the body with an adaptation that it needs to essentially meet because we've now increased the training stimulus for each individual muscle group because we're now on this split format, which means it's receiving more stimulus and it's also receiving more volume. So a couple of interesting things that we're going to see as adaptations from this. We're actually going to start to see an improvement in obviously the strengthening of muscle fibers. So we're talking about obviously the density of those fibers increasing. We actually followed an undulating periodization split on this program where some of the programs were heavier and then some of the programs were lighter so that we could also influence what was happening within essentially the cell. So when we're talking about, again, glycogen increasing in terms of its capacity, the amount of fuel that the actual muscle cell is going through is burning, then we're increasing that. We're also getting increases in obviously fatty acid metabolism and also glucose metabolism from following this sort of split. If we're training hard enough, we're also able to influence these things called satellite cells, which are pretty much blank copy cells that the body can bring in and then obviously donate its nuclei, and then ultimately we can start running anabolic processes through protein synthesis, through transcription, through ribosomes, and all these sorts of things coming into the fore of the cell in order to then add to the pool of available muscle cells, which again is an interesting adaptation because it's following on from the previous adaptations that we'd achieved. And then we started back. So we were able to then progress the split once more, staying within the push-pull legs format, but then this time again influencing a different system. So we actually brought in agonist antagonist supersets. So for example, we might work quads and hamstrings together, which essentially when one muscle group is working, the other muscle group is the stabilizing muscle group. So we've got the prime mover, and then we've got the other one that essentially is supporting the movement. So a synergist muscle group that we're going to pick. So these antagonist agonist supersets allowed us to then step up the program once more, whilst understanding that we're applying largely a sarcoplasmic hypertrophy based stimulus to the actual system. So again, following on with some of those adaptations that we've just gone through. And then the final phase that we went through would be another systemic based program. So we now move out of local based stimuli. We've run that stimulus for a couple of months. So we then moved into peripheral heart action training supersets once more. So this allowed us to take Claire's body fat from 22% body fat to, on her photos, probably around about 10% body fat, and take her body weight from 56 kilos all the way down to 46 kilos. This took us from high body fat at the front end, low body fat, and obviously the back end. And phenomenal improvements and adaptations in tone, shape, obviously definition, and obviously appearance. So one thing that you'll have noticed from what I've just explained to you is we're not repeating the same stimuli too often, too long. And that's a big problem for most people in a gym. So you're following the same programming month after month after month, or even if you're not aware of it, you're actually applying the same stimuli month after month after month. If we look at some of the things that we went through, obviously we went through systemic based training, local based training. We went through facets of different ways of setting up the actual program to create further adaptations within either the muscle cell, with how the liver functions, the cardiorespiratory system, the musculoskeletal system. We challenge the system constantly so that it has to adapt. And if we're able to do that, then we're able to obviously then start to pull results like the ones I've shared with you. When we're looking at non-exercise active thermogenesis, so the daily sort of step count, which contributes to roughly around about 15% of metabolic output, then the minimum required amount throughout is 10,000 steps per day. From a point of view of cardio, we actually use lots of different methods again with cardio, all the way from interval-based training, where we would have done 15 seconds on, 45 seconds off, to lactic-based training, where we would have done 300 meters as an actual sprint on a bike or on a rower, and then obviously a lengthy rest period, influencing again a different energy system, as well as ending at the back end with more aerobic style training that was low impact, easy to recover from, that allowed us to continue to train hard, but also get the adaptations that we wanted also from a metabolic point of view, from the calorie deficit and from the training stimulus. So I'm going to be going through nutrition in the next video, 7 different phases that we ran, 7 different ways of setting up the training in order to continue progress.